Lieutenant Commander Jack A. Ace Morrison gripped the controls of his F-6F Hellcat as the formation of 12 fighters cut through the pre-dawn darkness above the Pacific. It was March 15th, 1945. The war was grinding toward its bloody conclusion, but the Japanese weren't giving up easily. Every sortie could be your last. "Bandit at 2 o'clock high," crackled through his headset. Morrison's eyes snapped to the right, scanning the empty sky. Nothing. Just endless ocean and the first pale hints of sunrise bleeding through scattered clouds. "I don't see anything on Charlie 7. Morrison radioed back to his wingman, Lieutenant Bobby Chen. "You sure about that contact?" "Positive, Ace. Something big moving at impossible speed, about 10,000 feet above us." Morrison climbed, pushing his Hellcat's engine to full power. The Pratt and Whitney R-2800 roared as he gained altitude, his squadron following in tight formation. At 20,000 feet, he saw it. The object defied everything Morrison knew about aircraft, perfectly circular, approximately 60 feet in diameter, with a metallic surface that seemed to shift and shimmer like liquid mercury. No visible propulsion, no wings, no controlled surfaces. It moved with fluid precision that made their best fighters look clumsy by comparison. "What the hell is that thing?" Chen's voice carried a tremor Morrison had never heard before. They'd faced Zeros, Bettys, even the new rocket-powered Okas. This was different. This was impossible. The object accelerated without sound, without visible exhaust, climbing at a rate that would have killed any human pilot. It reached 40,000 feet in seconds, then simply vanished, leaving 12 American pilots staring at empty sky and questioning their sanity. Morrison keyed his radio with trembling fingers. "Tower, this is Hunter Leader. We just observed an unidentified aircraft of unknown configuration. Request immediate debriefing upon return to base." The response came quickly. "Hunter Leader, maintain radio silence regarding this contact. Return to base immediately for classified debriefing." As they descended toward the USS Enterprise, Morrison realized they'd encountered something that would challenge everything the military understood about aviation technology. Something that couldn't exist according to 1945 science, yet had just outflown America's finest aircraft with contemptuous ease. The date was significant for reasons Morrison couldn't yet comprehend. March 15th, 1945, exactly 4 months before the atomic bomb would end the war. But in those 4 months, American pilots would encounter these impossible craft 17 more times, each sighting more disturbing than the last, each one suggesting that someone, or something, possessed technology decades beyond anything in Allied or Axis arsenals. The classified debriefing room aboard the USS Enterprise felt like a tomb. Commander William Bull, Thorne, Naval Intelligence, sat across from Morrison and his squadron, his weathered face betraying nothing as he reviewed their reports for the 3rd time. "Gentlemen, what you've described violates every known principle of aerodynamics," Thorne said finally. "No aircraft can accelerate from 0 to what you estimate as 3,000 miles per hour in under 10 seconds. The G-forces alone would liquefy any pilot." "Sir, with respect, we all saw the same thing," Morrison replied. 12 experienced pilots don't simultaneously hallucinate identical impossible aircraft." Thorne opened a thick manila folder marked "Classified, Eyes Only." Inside were dozens of similar reports dating back 18 months. Pilots from Guadalcanal to the Philippines, all describing encounters with unidentifiable craft exhibiting impossible performance characteristics. "You're not the first," Thorne admitted grimly. "We've had 47 separate incidents, each one thoroughly investigated, each one dismissed as pilot error, battle fatigue, or misidentified conventional aircraft." He spread photographs across the table, blurry images captured by gun cameras during dogfights, circular objects appearing in the background of combat footage, metallic discs caught in peripheral shots while pilots engaged Japanese fighters. "And the problem isn't that we don't believe you," Thorne continued. The problem is we have no explanation. Our best aeronautical engineers at Wright Field have analyzed these reports. According to Dr. Theodor von Karman himself, the described performance characteristics are impossible with any known propulsion system. Chemical rockets, jet engines, even theoretical nuclear propulsion. Lieutenant Chen leaned forward. What about the Germans, sir? We know they've been developing rocket technology, jet aircraft. Could this be some advanced Nazi prototype? We considered that. Operation Paperclip has given us access to German aviation research. They're advanced, yes, but nothing approaching what you've described. Besides, these sightings are occurring in the Pacific Theater, thousands of miles from any German facility. Morrison studied the photographs more carefully. In one image, a disc-shaped object appeared to be pacing a formation of B-29s over Japan. The superfortresses looked primitive by comparison, like World War I biplanes flying alongside jets. Well, sir, what's the official position on these incidents? Thorne's expression hardened. Officially, they never happened. Every pilot who reports these encounters signs a classification agreement. The incidents are filed under atmospheric phenomena or equipment malfunction. The War Department's position is that acknowledging these sightings would damage morale and provide propaganda opportunities for the enemy. But unofficially, we're terrified. If these craft are real, and if they represent enemy technology, we're facing a threat we can't comprehend, let alone counter. Our most advanced aircraft are being outperformed by vehicles that operate beyond our understanding of physics. Thorne closed the folder. Previous attempts to engage these objects have failed. They seem to anticipate our movements, evading with impossible maneuvers. They've never shown hostile intent, but they're clearly observing our operations with technology far superior to anything in our arsenal. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. America's technological supremacy, their ace in the hole for winning the war, might be an illusion. Captain Sarah, Doc McKenzie, entered the briefing room 3 days later, her MIT PhD in theoretical physics, making her an anomaly among the battle-hardened naval officers. At 28, she was the youngest person ever assigned to the Navy's Special Phenomena Investigation Unit, a department so classified it didn't officially exist. McKenzie had spent the war developing radar countermeasures and electronic warfare systems. Her work on signal analysis had helped crack Japanese communication codes and identify new enemy aircraft types from their radar signatures. But this assignment was different. This was about something that shouldn't exist. Captain McKenzie, Commander Thorne began, you've reviewed all 47 incident reports. What's your assessment? McKenzie spread her analysis across the conference table, mathematical calculations, trajectory plots, energy requirement estimates. Her conclusions were as disturbing as they were precise, and the described maneuvers require energy outputs beyond anything in our technological capability, she said. The acceleration patterns suggest either controlled gravity manipulation or inertialess propulsion. Both concepts exist only in theoretical physics papers that won't be published for decades. Admiral Chester Nimitz himself had flown in from Pearl Harbor for this briefing. His presence indicated how seriously the Pacific Command was taking these incidents. Captain, in plain English, what are we dealing with? Nimitz asked. 3 possibilities, sir. First, mass hallucination among our most experienced pilots, which statistical analysis makes virtually impossible. Second, enemy technology decades ahead of anything we understand, which our intelligence indicates is impossible. Third, she paused, knowing how her next words would sound. Third, well, these craft represent technology from a source not involved in this war, not German, not Japanese, not Allied, something else entirely. The room erupted. That's ridiculous, barked Admiral Turner. You're talking about science fiction nonsense. McKenzie remained calm. Sir, I'm talking about observed phenomena that current science cannot explain. My job is to analyze evidence, not dismiss it because it challenges our assumptions. Nimitz raised his hand for silence. Captain, assuming these objects are real, how do we counter them? Well, we don't, sir. Our aircraft are propeller-driven fighters trying to intercept technology that appears to operate on principles we haven't discovered yet. It would be like cavalry charging jet fighters. Then what do you recommend? McKenzie had anticipated this question. We need to establish communication protocols. These craft appear during our most sensitive operations, major raids, fleet movements, weapons testing. They're observing us. I propose we attempt contact. Admiral Turner slammed his hand on the table. Absolutely not. You want us to surrender classified information to unknown entities. I want us to acknowledge reality, sir. These objects outperform our best aircraft by orders of magnitude. If they represented hostile intent, they could have destroyed our forces at will. Instead, they observe and withdraw. That suggests intelligence, not aggression. Nimitz studied her carefully. Captain, you're asking me to authorize contact with what you believe are extraterrestrial visitors. I'm asking you to authorize contact with superior technology, regardless of its origin. Our current strategy, denial and avoidance, has produced no results except growing pilot anxiety and operational disruption. The room fell silent. Finally, Admiral Turner spoke. This is madness. We're fighting a war against real enemies with real weapons. I won't waste resources chasing phantoms based on the theories of a physicist who's never seen combat. Nimitz made his decision. Captain McKenzie, your analysis is noted but rejected. We'll continue current protocols. These incidents will remain classified, and pilots will receive standard debriefings emphasizing equipment malfunction or atmospheric phenomena. McKenzie gathered her papers, knowing this wasn't over. As she reached the door, Nimitz called out, Captain, prepare a secondary analysis. Something's happening out there, and I need to understand what we're really facing. 2 weeks after her official rejection, McKenzie worked alone in a converted radar lab aboard the USS Yorktown. Admiral Nimitz had quietly authorized her secondary analysis with minimal resources and maximum secrecy. Officially, she was improving radar calibration protocols. Unofficially, she was developing the first systematic approach to understanding the impossible. Her workspace looked like a physicist's fever dream, radio receivers, jury-rigged, to detect unusual electromagnetic signatures, oscilloscopes displaying wave patterns that defied conventional analysis, mathematical equations covering every available surface, attempting to model propulsion systems that violated known physics. Lieutenant Morrison entered the lab carrying a sealed envelope. Doc, you asked to see this immediately. Inside were photographs from the latest encounter. USS Hornet's air group had spotted 3 disc-shaped objects during a dawn patrol near Iwo Jima. But these weren't the usual blurry gun camera shots. Morrison had convinced his squadron to use high-speed cameras designed for testing new ammunition. McKenzie studied the images under magnification. For the first time, she could see actual detail. The objects weren't solid metal as previously assumed. They appeared to be composed of some crystalline material that refracted light in impossible ways. More importantly, she could see faint geometric patterns on their surfaces, patterns that looked disturbingly intentional. Jack, tell me exactly what happened during this encounter. Morrison consulted his notes. Well, we were flying standard patrol when radar detected multiple bogies approaching from the northwest. But here's the weird part. Our radar showed them, then lost them, then picked them up again in completely different positions, like they were teleporting. How did they move? That's just it. They didn't move like aircraft. No banking, no turning radius. They changed direction instantly, 90-degree turns without slowing down, and the acceleration. Morrison shook his head. Doc, I've flown every fighter we have. These things made a Hellcat look like it was standing still. McKenzie examined the radar tracking data Morrison had smuggled out of the intelligence briefing. The contact patterns were impossible, objects appearing simultaneously at multiple locations, disappearing from one altitude and instantly reappearing at another, speeds fluctuating from stationary to over 2,000 lbap in seconds. But buried in the data, she found something others had missed. A pattern. Jack, look at these timestamps. Every encounter occurs during specific electromagnetic conditions, right after sunrise or before sunset, always when atmospheric ionization is at peak levels. Well, what does that mean? It might mean these craft require specific atmospheric conditions to operate efficiently, or, McKenzie paused, pursuing a disturbing thought, or they're using our own atmospheric electrical activity as an energy source. She pulled out her latest calculations. I've been analyzing the physics of these encounters. The energy requirements for the described maneuvers are enormous, far beyond any fuel-based propulsion system, but if they're somehow tapping into atmospheric electricity, solar radiation, or even the Earth's magnetic field. Morrison studied her equations. But you're saying they don't carry fuel? I'm saying they might not need to. These objects could be using ambient energy sources we don't even recognize as energy sources. It would explain their unlimited range, their impossible acceleration, their ability to operate without visible propulsion systems. McKenzie walked to a large wall chart showing all reported encounters. Red pins marked each sighting, connected by string to show movement pattern. The result looked like a spider web covering the entire Pacific theater. There's something else, Jack. These encounters aren't random. Look at the pattern. They always occur near our most advanced operations. The first atomic weapons test at Alamogordo, 3 sightings in the area that week, the new radar installations at Saipan, multiple encounters within hours of activation. You think they're studying our technology? I think they're studying our technological development. They appear most frequently around our newest, most advanced equipment. It's like they're monitoring our progress, documenting our capabilities. Morrison felt a chill. Doc, if you're right, that means they've been watching us develop atomic weapons. McKenzie nodded grimly. And radar, jet engines, guided missiles. Every major technological breakthrough of this war has been observed by craft with technology decades beyond ours. She turned to face Morrison directly. Jack, I need you to do something that could end both our careers. I need you to attempt communication during your next encounter. 3 days later, Morrison's opportunity came during a routine combat air patrol over the Mariana Islands. His radar operator, Petty Officer Collins, detected the familiar impossible signature at 0647 hours. Contact bearing 270, range 15 miles at altitude unknown, Collins reported. Sir, it's doing that thing again, appearing and disappearing on scope. Morrison had prepared for this moment. Hidden in his cockpit was Mackenzie's experimental communication device, a modified radio transmitter capable of broadcasting across multiple frequencies simultaneously, including bands theoretically impossible for 1945 technology to receive. All aircraft maintain formation, do not engage. Repeat, do not engage, Morrison ordered, breaking every military protocol about unidentified aircraft. The object appeared visually at 20,000 feet, exactly as described in previous encounters, disc-shaped, approximately 60 feet in diameter, moving with fluid grace that made Morrison's Hellcat feel like a flying anvil. But this time, instead of climbing away, it seemed to hover, almost as if waiting. Morrison activated Mackenzie's device. Unknown aircraft? This is United States Navy Flight Hunter 7. If you can understand this transmission, please respond on any frequency. Nothing. The object maintained its position for 30 seconds, then began its characteristic impossible acceleration skyward. Wait, Morrison transmitted desperately. We're not hostile. We want to communicate. The object stopped. For the first time in 49 recorded encounters, one of the mysterious craft had reacted to human contact. It descended slowly, approaching Morrison's formation with deliberate, measured movements. Then disaster struck. Morrison's wingman, Lieutenant Reynolds, panicked. Despite explicit orders, he activated his gun sight and fired a burst from his 6 .50 caliber machine guns. The tracers streaked harmlessly past the object, but the intent was unmistakable. The object's response was immediate and terrifying. In less than 2 seconds, it positioned itself directly above Reynolds' aircraft. A brilliant blue-white beam emanated from its underside, and Reynolds' Hellcat simply stopped flying. The engine died, all electrical systems failed, and the aircraft began falling like a stone toward the Pacific. "Mayday! Mayday! Reynolds is going down!" Morrison shouted into his radio, watching his friend's fighter plummet helplessly. At 5,000 feet, just as Reynolds prepared for impact, his engine spontaneously restarted. Electrical power returned, and he regained control, pulling out of the dive with barely 500 feet to spare. The object was gone. Back on the Yorktown, McKenzie reviewed Morrison's radio recordings and gun camera footage in stunned silence. The beam that had disabled Reynolds' aircraft showed characteristics unlike any known weapon, electromagnetic pulse effects decades before such technology should exist. "They could have destroyed him," she murmured. "Instead, they demonstrated capability and then showed mercy." Commander Thorne was less philosophical. "Captain McKenzie, your unauthorized experiment nearly resulted in the loss of a pilot and aircraft. This ends now." "Sir, don't you see what happened? They responded to communication. They showed restraint when fired upon. This proves intelligence, possibly even benevolent intent. What it proves is that these objects possess weapons technology that makes our most advanced fighters helpless. Lieutenant Reynolds' aircraft was completely disabled by some form of energy beam we can't even identify, let alone defend against." McKenzie pulled up the technical analysis. The electromagnetic signature was unlike anything in our weapons catalog. No radiation, no heat signature, no explosive component. It was like they temporarily suspended the electrical activity in his aircraft without causing permanent damage. Admiral Turner entered the lab unexpectedly. "Captain, I've reviewed the incident report. Your communication attempt has escalated this situation beyond acceptable risk levels. Sir, we proved communication is possible. You proved these objects can disable our aircraft at will. What happens when they decide to permanently disable an entire carrier group?" McKenzie realized her breakthrough was being interpreted as a catastrophic failure. The first successful contact with the impossible had been reframed as a demonstration of American vulnerability. "Admiral, with respect, they could have done that already. They've had dozens of opportunities to attack our forces. Instead, they observe, withdraw, and in this case, saved a pilot's life." Turner's expression was granite. "Captain, you're relieved of this assignment. Report to Pearl Harbor for reassignment to conventional radar development." As security officers escorted McKenzie from the lab, she caught Morrison's eye. His slight nod told her everything she needed to know. The official investigation might be over, but the real work was just beginning. McKenzie's reassignment to Pearl Harbor was designed to bury her research, but Admiral Nimitz had other plans. 3 days after her arrival, she found herself in a bunker 50 feet below Pacific Fleet headquarters, surrounded by officers whose very existence was classified. "Captain, welcome to Project Blue Sky," Nimitz said, gesturing to a room filled with the most advanced communication and analysis equipment in the Pacific Theater. "Officially, this project doesn't exist. Unofficially, it's our last line of defense against a threat we don't understand." The assembled team represented the military's most unconventional thinkers. Colonel Frank Edwards from Army Air Force Intelligence, who'd spent 2 years documenting impossible aircraft over Europe. Dr. Margaret Chen, a cryptographer who'd cracked Japanese diplomatic codes by recognizing patterns others dismissed as random. Commander Robert Stevens, whose experimental radar work had detected the objects before anyone knew what to look for. So the situation has escalated, Nimitz continued. Yesterday, a formation of these objects appeared over our atomic weapons testing facility at Wendover Army Airfield. They maintained position for 17 minutes, clearly observing our B-29 crews practicing delivery procedures. McKenzie felt her blood run cold. Sir, they're monitoring our nuclear program. It gets worse. Similar objects have been spotted near Los Alamos, Oak Ridge, and Hanford. Every major facility involved in the Manhattan Project has reported encounters. These aren't coincidental sightings. This is systematic reconnaissance. Dr. Chen spread classified photographs across the conference table. Unlike the blurry Pacific Theater images, these were crystal-clear shots taken by Army Air Force photographers using telescopic lenses. The objects showed unprecedented detail, geometric patterns that looked almost like writing, surfaces that seemed to shift between metallic and translucent, configurations that defied aerodynamic principles. We've identified at least 3 distinct types, Chen explained. Small reconnaissance craft about 60 feet in diameter, larger objects approximately 300 feet across, and massive triangular vehicles that our pilots estimated over 1,000 feet per side. Colonel Edwards leaned forward. Captain McKenzie, your communication attempt in the Pacific was noted by every major intelligence. The Germans have accelerated their own investigation into what they call Foo Fight. The Soviets have established a special committee under Beria himself. Everyone realizes these objects represent technology beyond current human capability. But what's the official position now? McKenzie asked. Nimitz's expression darkened. But the War Department wants them destroyed. Secretary Stimson has authorized the development of specific weapons to engage these craft. They're treating this as a clear and present threat to American security. Sir, that's exactly the wrong approach, McKenzie protested. Oh, these objects have shown no hostile intent. They observe and withdraw. Attacking them could provoke. What could provoke what, Captain? Admiral Turner's voice cut through the room like ice. He'd arrived unannounced, carrying orders that would change everything. Admiral Turner, Nimitz acknowledged stiffly. I wasn't expecting you. Change of plans, Chester. Washington has decided this situation requires direct action. Turner placed a sealed folder on the table. Operation Skyhawk is hereby authorized. We're going to capture one of these objects. McKenzie stared in horror. Sir, we have no idea what the consequences of inaction are worse, Turner interrupted. These objects have observed our most classified weapons programs. They possess technology decades beyond ours. The President has decided we cannot allow potential enemies to maintain such advantages. Dr. Chen studied the operation plans. This calls for electromagnetic nets, experimental rockets, coordinated attacks by entire fighter squadrons. We're talking about an act of war against an unknown force. We're talking about defending American interests, Turner replied coldly. Captain McKenzie, your research suggests these objects use atmospheric electricity as an energy source. We're going to exploit that weakness. McKenzie realized with dawning horror what they intended. You're going to try to disrupt their power source during an encounter, force them to crash. Exactly. Dr. Tesla's research into wireless power transmission has provided us with theoretical frameworks for electromagnetic disruption. If these craft depend on ambient energy, we can deny them that energy. Colonel Edwards looked skeptical. Admiral, this assumes they can't simply switch to alternative power sources. What if they have backup systems we can't affect? And then we'll have learned something valuable about their capabilities. But if we succeed, we'll have captured technology that could win not just this war, but secure American dominance for generations. Nimitz studied the operation plans with obvious reluctance. Turner, if this fails, if we provoke these objects into hostile action, we could be facing a threat we're completely unprepared to handle. Chester, we're already facing that threat. The only question is whether we're going to respond passively or take control of the situation. As Turner left to coordinate Operation Skyhawk, McKenzie realized the military was about to make the most dangerous decision in human history. They were going to war against forces they didn't understand, using technology they couldn't comprehend, with consequences that could doom humanity itself. McKenzie had 72 hours before Operation Skyhawk launched. Working with Morrison and a handful of trusted allies, she began the most desperate research project of her career, understanding the object's technology before the military destroyed any chance of peaceful contact. In a converted storage facility at Hickam Field, her unofficial team assembled equipment scavenged from across the Pacific Fleet. Dr. Chen contributed advanced cryptographic analysis tools. Morrison provided detailed pilot observations from 18 encounters. Commander Stevens brought experimental radar equipment capable of detecting electromagnetic anomalies. "Look at this pattern," McKenzie said, projecting radio intercepts onto a makeshift screen. "Every time these objects appear, there's a spike in electromagnetic activity across multiple frequencies. But it's not random, it's structured, almost like a language," Dr. Chen finished, studying the wave patterns. These aren't just energy signatures, they're communication protocols." Morrison leaned over the data. "Doc, are you saying these things are talking to each other?" "I'm saying they're using electromagnetic frequencies we barely understand to coordinate their activities. And more importantly, I think I can decode their basic communication structure." Chen's cryptographic expertise proved invaluable. Working through the night, she identified recurring patterns in the electromagnetic signatures, mathematical sequences that appeared to represent positional data, temporal coordinates, and operational status reports. "It's actually elegant," Chen explained. "They're using prime number sequences to encode spatial relationships, Fibonacci progressions for temporal data, and harmonic frequencies for what appears to be operational commands." Stevens monitored the team's work nervously.
This is all fascinating, but Admiral Turner's electromagnetic disruption weapons go live in 60 hours. If you're going to stop Operation Skyhawk, you need proof these objects are intelligent, not just evidence they use advanced technology. McKenzie stared at the decoded pattern, suddenly realizing what they'd discovered. They're not just intelligent, they're trying to communicate with. Look at these frequency modulations from the last encounter.
They match the radio bands Morrison used during his communication attempt. She pulled up comparative analysis charts. After Morrison's transmission, their communication patterns shifted to include elements of human radio protocols. "They're learning our language." Morrison felt a chill of recognition. The object that stopped when I called out. It wasn't just reacting to my voice. It was analyzing our communication methods. Exactly. And based on these patterns, they've been attempting to respond using increasingly complex electromagnetic signals. We've been ignoring their attempts to talk to us because we didn't recognize their communication medium. Chen decoded the latest intercepted signals with growing excitement. "McKenzie, look at this. The mathematical progressions are becoming more sophisticated, incorporating Earth-based mathematical constants. Pi, the golden ratio, Planck's constant. They're using our own scientific knowledge to establish common ground." Stevens interrupted urgently. "We've got incoming electromagnetic signatures. 3 objects approaching from the northwest, heading directly for Pearl Harbor." On the radar screens, the familiar impossible contacts appeared. But this time, McKenzie was ready. She activated a modified transmitter array, broadcasting mathematical sequences that matched the patterns they'd decoded from previous encounters. The response was immediate and unprecedented. Instead of the usual observation and withdrawal pattern, the objects descended to 10,000 feet and began transmitting complex mathematical theorems directly to McKenzie's equipment. "My God," Chen whispered, watching the data stream. "They're sending us advanced physics equations, unified field theory, gravitational manipulation, Energy-matter conversion formulas that won't be discovered for decades. Morrison watched the objects through binoculars. Well, they're not just hovering. They're positioning themselves in a geometric pattern, like they're demonstrating something. McKenzie realized with stunning clarity what was happening. They're teaching us. The entire time, every encounter, every observation, they've been trying to share their knowledge. We've been treating first contact as a military threat when it's actually an educational opportunity. The implications were staggering. The objects weren't reconnaissance, they were teachers. Their interest in atomic weapons wasn't hostile surveillance, it was concern about humanity's technological development without corresponding wisdom. But even as breakthrough understanding dawned, Stevens received an urgent communication. Admiral Turner's task force has launched. Operation Skyhawk is underway. They'll reach the intercept zone in 90 minutes. McKenzie stared at the continuing data transmission from the objects above Pearl Harbor. Humanity was about to attack its greatest teachers, possibly destroying the most important opportunity in human history. Admiral Turner's task force consisted of 12 specially modified F-6F Hellcats equipped with experimental electromagnetic pulse weapons, supported by destroyers carrying Tesla-inspired wireless power disruption devices. The plan was simple: surround one of the objects, disrupt its power source, and force it down for capture. McKenzie frantically transmitted warnings to the approaching objects, using the mathematical communication protocols they'd established. The response was immediate and chilling. The objects began withdrawing, but not in their usual instantaneous departure. They moved slowly, deliberately, as if reluctant to leave despite obvious danger. Or they understand the threat, Chen observed, monitoring the electromagnetic communications. But they're not fleeing. They're trying to complete their transmission. Morrison studied the tactical display. Sidok, Turner's fighters are closing fast. Those electromagnetic weapons are designed to create a localized EMP field. If they work, they'll knock those objects right out of the sky. McKenzie watched in horror as streams of advanced scientific data continued flowing from the retreating objects. Formulas for clean energy generation, medical technologies, space travel principles, knowledge that could transform human civilization, being transmitted with desperate urgency. They know this might be their last chance to share their knowledge, she realized. They're trying to upload everything they can before we destroy the opportunity. Stevens coordinated with loyal personnel across the fleet. I've got contacts at Fleet Communications. If we can convince Admiral Nimitz that these objects are attempting peaceful contact, he might be able to abort Skyhawk. Not enough time, Morrison said grimly. Turner's fighters are already in attack formation, and look at this. They've detected the object's withdrawal pattern. They're moving to intercept. On the radar screens, the military drama played out with devastating precision. Turner's fighters formed a wide net, their electromagnetic weapons powering up for coordinated discharge. The three objects, still transmitting scientific data, found their retreat path blocked. McKenzie made a desperate decision. Chen, encode everything we've learned about their communication protocols. Stevens, patch me through to Turner's frequency on emergency override. Captain, this is Admiral Turner, came the terse response. You are ordered to maintain radio silence. Admiral, those objects are attempting peaceful communication. They're sharing advanced scientific knowledge. Attacking them would be the greatest mistake in human history. Captain, you're out of line. These objects have conducted unauthorized surveillance of classified military facilities. They represent a clear threat to American security. McKenzie watched the tactical display as Turner's fighters closed to weapon range. The objects had stopped transmitting and assumed a defensive formation, 3 points of a perfect triangle, rotating slowly around their common center. Admiral, they're not threatening us. They're protecting themselves. You're about to start a war we can't possibly win. Turner's response was ice cold. All units, weapons free.
Initiate electromagnetic pulse in 3, 2, 1. The sea erupted in artificial lightning as 12 experimental EMP weapons discharged simultaneously. The electromagnetic pulse was visible as crackling arcs of electricity spanning miles of earth. For 30 seconds, the Pacific Theater's most advanced technology attempted to bring down vehicles operating on principles beyond human understanding. When the electromagnetic storm cleared,
Turner's fighters found themselves facing something unprecedented. The three objects hung motionless in the sky, completely unaffected by weapons designed to disrupt any known electrical system. But now they were no longer alone. Dozens of additional objects materialized around Turner's formation. Larger craft, more advanced configurations, vehicles that dwarfed anything in human arsenals. The message was unmistakable. Humanity had just attacked teachers who possessed the power to defend themselves. McKenzie watched in terror as the implications became clear. Operation Skyhawk hadn't captured advanced technology. It had demonstrated human aggression to beings capable of ending human civilization with contemptuous ease. The radio crackled with Turner's shaken voice. "All units, disengage immediately. Repeat. Disengage and return to base." But the damage was done. First contact had become first conflict, and humanity had fired the opening shots. The standoff lasted 6 hours. Dozens of alien craft surrounded Turner's fighter formation, while Mackenzie's team worked frantically to re-establish communication from Pearl Harbor. The electromagnetic spectrum erupted with signals, not the mathematical sequences they decoded earlier, but something far more complex and urgent. "They're transmitting on every frequency simultaneously," Chen reported, her voice tight with tension. "The signal structure is completely different from before, more urgent, more emotional." McKenzie studied the patterns flooding their receivers. Where previous communications had been methodical, mathematical progressions, these were chaotic, overlapping, intense. They're arguing among themselves. Some kind of internal debate. Morrison monitored Admiral Turner's increasingly desperate radio calls. The task force was trapped in the center of a formation that could destroy them instantly, yet the alien craft maintained perfect position without any aggressive action. "Doc, I think they're deciding what to do with us," Morrison said grimly. "And I don't think they all agree." Stevens detected new electromagnetic signatures approaching from multiple directions. More contacts incoming. "We're looking at over 100 objects now, converging on Turner's position." McKenzie realized this was humanity's final test. The aliens' response to human aggression would determine the future of both species. She activated every transmitter available, broadcasting on all frequencies with a message that combined mathematical sequences, human language, and desperate sincerity. To the beings observing us, "We are a young species. We make mistakes. Some of us fired weapons out of fear, not understanding your peaceful intentions. Please allow us to demonstrate that we can learn, that we can choose wisdom over fear." For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then, gradually, the chaotic electromagnetic signals began organizing into recognizable patterns. The aliens were responding, not with the mathematical formulas of before, but with something that resembled human emotional expression translated into electromagnetic frequency. Chen's translation equipment struggled with the complex signal. It's not quite language as we understand it, but the harmonic structures suggest forgiveness, caution, hope. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Lieutenant Reynolds, the pilot whose aircraft had been disabled during Morrison's first communication attempt, transmitted directly to the alien formation using his aircraft's radio. "I was the one who fired first," Reynolds broadcast. "During our previous encounter, you could have destroyed me, but you didn't. You saved my life. I want you to know that not all humans choose violence when facing the unknown." The response was immediate and profound. The alien craft began transmitting a new type of signal. not mathematical formulas or emotional patterns, but something that resembled historical data, images, electromagnetic impressions, information about their own species' development. McKenzie watched in awe as the aliens shared their story. A civilization that had faced the same choice millennia ago: react to the unknown with fear and violence, or choose understanding and growth. They had chosen growth, and they were offering humanity the same opportunity. They're showing us possible futures, Chen whispered, translating the complex data streams, paths of development we could follow, technologies we could master, wisdom we could gain, but only if we choose cooperation over conflict. Admiral Turner's voice crackled through the radio, barely controlled. All units, weapons are remaining safe. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage under any circumstances. The alien formation began a slow, deliberate departure. But unlike previous encounters, they moved in stages, allowing human observers to document their technology, their capabilities, their peaceful intentions. It was a demonstration of trust, showing themselves vulnerable to human weapons while expecting humanity to choose restraint. As the last alien craft disappeared beyond the horizon, they left behind something unprecedented, a clear electromagnetic signal repeating on a specific frequency, mathematical coordinates indicating a specific location and time for future contact. McKenzie stared at the coordinates in amazement. They're inviting us to a formal meeting. 3 days from now, at a location in the mid-Pacific, they want to establish official contact. Admiral Nimitz convened an emergency conference aboard the USS Missouri involving every senior Pacific Theater commander. The evidence was undeniable: gun camera footage, electromagnetic recordings, testimonies from dozens of pilots and radar operators. Humanity had made contact with an intelligence far superior to anything on Earth. Admiral Turner sat in stunned silence as McKenzie presented her analysis. The electromagnetic weapons that should have crippled the alien craft hadn't even registered on their systems. The demonstration of superior technology had been absolute. They could have destroyed Turner's entire task force without effort, yet they chose restraint. "Gentlemen," Nimitz began, "we face a decision that will define humanity's future. These beings have offered formal contact. They've demonstrated peaceful intentions despite our aggressive response. The question is, how do we proceed?" Secretary of War Stimson, who had flown in from Washington, studied the intelligence reports with obvious discomfort. "Admiral, these entities have observed our most classified weapons programs. They possess technology that makes our most advanced aircraft look primitive. How can we trust their intentions?" McKenzie stood to address the assembly. "Sir, with respect, the question isn't whether we can trust them. The question is whether we're wise enough to accept the opportunity they're offering. They've shared advanced scientific knowledge, demonstrated restraint under attack, and explicitly invited formal diplomatic contact." Colonel Edwards presented aerial reconnaissance from the proposed meeting coordinates, but the location they've specified is 200 miles from any land, deep water, no strategic value. If they wanted to ambush our forces, they could choose better terrain. This suggests genuine diplomatic intent. Dr. Chen added her cryptographic analysis, or the mathematical progressions in their final transmission indicate systematic sharing of information. Energy technologies, medical advances, space travel principles, they're offering to accelerate human development by centuries. Admiral Turner finally spoke, his voice heavy with the weight of recognition. "I authorized an attack on beings who were trying to help us. My electromagnetic weapons were useless against technology I can't even comprehend. We fired on our teachers." The room fell silent as Turner's admission sank in. The military officer who had most strongly advocated for aggressive action was now acknowledging the magnitude of their mistake. Morrison presented the pilot's perspective. "Sir, every man who's encountered these craft reports the same thing. They could have destroyed us at will, but they chose observation and eventual communication. Even when fired upon, they responded with minimum force necessary for self-defense. Nimitz studied weather reports for the proposed meeting date. Conditions will be optimal for carrier operations. We could position a task force at the coordinates with diplomatic personnel, scientific observers, and minimal defensive capability. Stimpson remained skeptical. Admiral, you're asking me to authorize contact with entities whose capabilities we can't assess, whose intentions we can't verify, whose very existence challenges everything we understand about physics and technology. McKenzie pulled out her final piece of evidence, decoded alien transmissions from the past week. Mr. Secretary, they've been monitoring our radio broadcasts. They know about our war, our casualties, our struggle against fascism. The data suggests they approve of our fight for freedom against tyranny. We share common values. The breakthrough moment came from an unexpected source. Admiral Halsey, known for his aggressive tactics against the Japanese, stood and addressed the assembly. Gentlemen, I've spent 3 years fighting an enemy that attacks without warning, shows no mercy, and fights to the death. These beings have shown restraint, offered knowledge, and extended an invitation for peaceful contact. If we reject this opportunity out of fear, we're no better than the fascists we're fighting. Nimitz made the decision that would change human history. Gentlemen, the United States Navy will attend this meeting. We'll approach with scientific observers, diplomatic personnel, and minimal military presence. We're going to find out what they want to teach us. As the conference ended, McKenzie realized they had achieved something unprecedented, converting military skeptics into advocates for peaceful first contact through evidence, logic, and the aliens' own demonstration of superior wisdom. The formal contact occurred on March 23, 1945, at precisely 1200 hours Pacific time. The USS Missouri served as humanity's diplomatic platform, carrying a delegation that included McKenzie, Morrison, Dr. Chen, and representatives from every allied nation. What transpired during those 4 hours of contact remained classified for 78 years. The meeting established protocols that would guide human-alien relations for generations. The beings, who identified themselves through electromagnetic harmonics that translated roughly as the observers, revealed they had monitored human development since the dawn of civilization. They had watched humanity's technological progress with growing concern, particularly after atomic weapons testing began. They weren't trying to interfere. McKenzie wrote in her classified memoir, finally declassified in 2023, they were waiting for us to demonstrate wisdom alongside power. Our aggressive response to their presence was actually the test. How we handled first contact would determine whether they offered accelerated technological development or simply continued passive observation. The observers shared selective knowledge, clean energy principles that would eventually become fusion power, medical technologies that wouldn't appear until the 1990s, and computational theories that laid groundwork for modern electronics. But they made one condition clear. Humanity had to demonstrate peaceful intent before receiving advanced space travel technology. Admiral Turner, whose attack had nearly destroyed the opportunity, became the program's most dedicated advocate. I learned that strength without wisdom is not strength at all, he testified to a secret congressional committee in 1947. These beings could have ended human civilization with a thought. Instead, they chose to educate us. My job became ensuring we proved worthy of their trust. The immediate impact was carefully concealed from public knowledge. The atomic bombs dropped on Japan incorporated energy-focusing principles learned from the observers, making the weapons more efficient while reducing radioactive fallout. Radar technology advanced decades ahead of schedule. Computer development accelerated far beyond what natural human progress would have achieved. Dr. McKenzie continued coordinating human observer contact until her death in 1994. Her final report, declassified in 2023, revealed the full scope of their influence. Every major technological breakthrough from 1945 to 1975 incorporated observer guidance, transistors, integrated circuits, satellite technology, even the Internet, all developed using principles they shared during carefully managed contact sessions. The program's secrecy wasn't about hiding alien existence, it was about protecting humanity's development timeline. The observers insisted that knowledge released too quickly would destabilize human society. Each technological gift came with careful timing, ensuring humanity could integrate advances without social collapse. Morrison, who lived to age 98, revealed the personal cost of the secret in his deathbed testimony. And we carried the weight of humanity's future for 50 years. Every decision about what technology to release, when to release it, how much truth the public could handle. We made those choices knowing they would affect billions of lives. The final revelation came in 2023 when government archives disclosed Operation Blue Sky's complete files. The UFO sightings that had puzzled researchers for decades weren't random encounters. They were scheduled meetings, ongoing diplomatic contact, and humanity's continued education by beings who had chosen patience over conquest. Today, as humanity stands on the threshold of interstellar travel, the observer's final gift has been revealed. The coordinates of other civilizations ready for contact. The species that once attacked its teachers out of fear has been judged ready to become teachers themselves. The pilots who swore the objects over the Pacific weren't from Earth were absolutely right, but they were also wrong about one crucial detail. Those impossible craft weren't invaders or enemies. They were humanity's graduation committee, waiting 78 years for their students to prove they had learned the most important lesson of all, that true strength comes from choosing wisdom over fear. Even when facing the impossible, the age of secret contact has ended. The age of open cooperation has begun. And it all started with 12 American pilots who encountered the impossible over the Pacific and chose to see opportunity instead of threat.